History can pivot on a single, unexpected decision. Sometimes the course of nations and the fate of millions are altered, not by grand plans, but by a moment, an instant when someone speaks, acts, or chooses differently than expected. The fall of the Berlin Wall, for example, was triggered by a misstatement at a press conference. One official's words set off a chain reaction that changed the world. What seemed like a small slip became the spark for a revolution, and within hours, decades of division crumbled. Today, September 10, 2025, we face another such turning point. The world holds its breath, uncertain of what tomorrow will bring. A trade dispute born from populist politics and deepening mistrust has escalated into a crisis over the medicines that keep millions of Americans healthy and alive. The shelves that once seemed endlessly stocked now look vulnerable. Former President Trump's sweeping tariffs on Indian goods were meant to show strength, to protect American interests. But instead, they exposed a hidden American weakness: our dependence on foreign pharmaceuticals and the delicate balance of global trade. India's response threatens the very foundation of America's healthcare system. By restricting exports, India holds a powerful card, one that could reshape the lives of millions. This isn't just another trade spat, it's a conflict that touches every medicine cabinet in the country, from the youngest child to the oldest grandparent. The impact is immediate, personal, and impossible to ignore. The medicine war is a stark reminder. In our interconnected world, one government's actions can have deeply personal consequences for people thousands of miles away. The ripple effects travel across oceans, linking strangers in ways they never imagined. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about national security, economic policy, and the true cost of global power. Are we prepared for the vulnerabilities we've created? The systems we rely on are more fragile than we think. What once seemed unbreakable now feels uncertain, even precarious, and now, the world is watching as a single decision transforms everything. The next chapter in history is being written, and its outcome is still unknown. The roots of this crisis lie in Trump's revived America First trade policy, a doctrine that prioritized U.S. interests above all else, regardless of global partnerships or past alliances. Upon returning to the White House, his administration imposed sweeping tariffs on a range of imports, with India singled out as a primary target in this new economic offensive. The stated goal was clear: correct what was seen as an unfair trade imbalance that, in the eyes of the administration, had long favored India at America's expense. These tariffs hit Indian industries hard: textiles, IT, and most crucially, pharmaceuticals, which had become vital to both economies. For India, this wasn't just economic pain. It felt like a deep betrayal by a supposed ally, undermining years of trust and cooperation. Years of painstaking diplomatic progress unraveled almost overnight, and India's leaders suddenly faced mounting domestic outrage and political pressure. The most sensitive blow landed on India's pharmaceutical sector, the so-called pharmacy of the world, responsible for supplying affordable medicines globally. Tariffs now threaten to disrupt the flow of affordable generic drugs to the U.S., creating uncertainty for millions of American patients who relied on these medicines. In New Delhi, anger quickly replaced frustration, and the narrative shifted. America was now treating India as a subordinate, not a true partner on the world stage. The stage was set for a bold and unprecedented response, one that would move the conflict from the realm of economics to the far more sensitive arena of public health. The medicine war had begun, and the world was about to witness a new chapter in global power dynamics. India knew a tit-for-tat tariff war was unwinnable. Instead, it leveraged its unique strength: pharmaceuticals. India announced a new export monitoring committee, reviewing shipments of key medicines to ensure domestic supply. The message to Washington was clear: India could turn off the tap. The list included antibiotics, blood pressure meds, diabetes treatments, the generics millions of Americans rely on. This wasn't about government coffers. It was about the daily lives of U.S. citizens. India's move escalated the dispute from dollars to life or death stakes. It was a calculated gamble: risk its reputation as a reliable supplier, but force the U.S. to the negotiating table. The world watched as India tested the limits of its leverage. Would Washington blink, or would the standoff spiral further? The answer would have global consequences. The medicine war had entered a new, dangerous phase. America's vulnerability was now exposed for all to see, as the cracks in the system became impossible to ignore. In pursuit of lower healthcare costs, the U.S. had become deeply dependent on Indian generics. About 40% of all generic drugs in the US come from India, making India the pharmacy to the world and a lifeline for millions of American patients. This wasn't accidental, it was the result of decades of outsourcing for efficiency and cost savings, as pharmaceutical companies shifted production overseas to maximize profits and streamline operations. Generic drugs are the backbone of affordable healthcare, making up nearly 90% of prescriptions filled in the US, and providing critical access to life-saving treatments for people from all walks of life. But this efficiency came at a price: the loss of domestic manufacturing and a critical strategic weakness that left the nation exposed to global disruptions. Rebuilding that capacity would take years, requiring massive investment, new infrastructure, and a skilled workforce that had long since moved on. Suddenly, shortages of essential medicines were a real threat, with empty shelves and out-of-stock signs becoming a common sight. Hospitals and pharmacies braced for impact. Patients with chronic conditions faced terrifying uncertainty, unsure if their next dose would be available when they needed it most. The foundation of American medicine rested on a fragile supply line, stretched thin across continents, and vulnerable to political tensions and logistical breakdowns. National security experts had warned about oil and minerals, but few saw the risk in pharmaceuticals, until it was too late, and the consequences were already unfolding. The medicine war forced a painful reckoning, sparking urgent debates in Congress and headlines across the nation. America's health was in the hands of a nation it had just alienated, making diplomacy and cooperation more crucial than ever before. The consequences were immediate and personal, touching families, the elderly, and the most vulnerable in every community across the country. Washington was stunned. The Trump administration, expecting India to fold, was blindsided by the pharmaceutical counterstrike. Some officials wanted to double down, threatening harsher penalties. But public health leaders warned of disaster drug shortages, price spikes, and a looming crisis. Democrats seized the moment, blaming reckless trade policy for endangering American lives. The government was split: confrontation or de-escalation. Emergency meetings explored ramping up domestic production or turning to other countries, but neither was a quick fix. The crisis exposed the limits of America first in a globalized world. Backing down meant political defeat. Pressing forward risked a public health catastrophe. The standoff became a test: would populist rhetoric or harsh reality prevail? The stakes had never been higher. In India, the government's move sparked national pride. The decision was framed as a long-overdue assertion of India's power. Media and social networks celebrated the country's new leverage: hash pills. For power trended as India stood up to the US Prime Minister Modi's approval soared. He was seen as defending national dignity. Critics warned of long-term risks. Damaging India's reputation as a reliable supplier could backfire. But for now, the mood was one of unity and resolve. The conflict was no longer just about tariffs. It was about respect and equality. The medicine war became a symbol of a new, assertive India. The government had tapped into deep national pride. India was ready to play hardball on the world stage. India's strategy echoed a global trend: weaponizing essential goods. Russia had long used its gas exports to pressure Europe. Now India was using medicine. Both dependencies were born from economic logic. Importing was cheaper than producing at home. But efficiency created vulnerability. India's move signaled a shift. Global power now includes control over supply chains, not just armies. Disrupting daily life with withheld goods is a new form of coercion. No soldiers needed. This is supply chain statecraft. National security now means economic resilience. If India succeeds, other nations may follow, turning essential goods into geopolitical weapons. The medicine war could be just the beginning. The irony is striking. America helped build the very Indian pharmaceutical industry now being used as leverage. US trade policy and outsourcing fueled India's rise as the pharmacy of the world. The FDA worked closely with Indian firms, ensuring access to the US market. The pursuit of efficiency created a strategic vulnerability no one foresaw. Economic theories ignored the risks of deep interdependence. Now trade relationships have become battlegrounds. America thought it was outsourcing production. In reality, it outsourced part of its own security. The medicine war is a reckoning with the unintended consequences of globalization. The student has learned to use the master's tools. This isn't just about politics or economics, it's about people. Millions in the US rely on Indian generics. Millions in India depend on stable trade. The medicine war threatens real human suffering, drug shortages, soaring prices, and a strained healthcare system. The casualties won't be soldiers, but patients unable to get life-saving medicine. The crisis could destabilize the entire global pharmaceutical supply chain. If trust breaks down, nations may hoard drugs, triggering worldwide shortages and price spikes. Decades of public health progress could be undone in months. This is a wake-up call. Trade wars now have life-or-death consequences. Leaders in Washington and New Delhi must find a way to de-escalate. The health of millions hangs in the balance. The stakes are simply too high for this war to continue.